Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Patch Notes, a show where we cover the biggest gaming news from the previous week in a nice bit-sized package. My name is Drew and as always, it's great to see you guys. This episode we are covering the news from the week of September 29th, 2017. This week was absolutely full of news, so let's go ahead and get started with it at the beginning of the week.
So let's take a picture.
Over the past couple of years, the massive media conglomerate company Vivendi has been attempting to aggressively take over the company that we all know and love, Ubisoft. Well, some of us love them. An aggressive takeover is what happens when one company owns most or a majority of another company's stocks, which is exactly what Vivendi is trying to do. They are picking up any Ubisoft stocks that they can, and it is projected that by this November they will have enough stocks in the company to take it over. Earlier this month, C.A.G.E.D, I think that's how you say his name, I'm trying to be respectful here, and his family, who were the founders of Ubisoft, bought 2 million stocks in Ubisoft to try to combat this aggressive takeover. It's debatable whether or not this was enough, though. Now the only question that remains is whether or not Vivendi will just continue on with this aggressive takeover or will actually offer money to the C.A.G.E.D family for Ubisoft. It's not clear exactly which route would be cheaper for Vivendi in the long run. They can keep going buying up shares, which could cost them a lot of money in the long run, or they can just set up a certain offer, but that offer could get declined. C.A.G.E.D, who is once again one of the co-founders of Ubisoft and its CEO, argues that an aggressive takeover in this industry is actually very risky because it is Ubisoft's independence that ultimately makes them successful, and an aggressive takeover would kind of tarnish that image. He said, "In our industry, independence is needed to take risks, to be innovative. That is not compatible with Vivendi's way of operating." So yeah, according to C.A.G.E.D, who is admittedly pretty biased on the issue, it wouldn't be a good idea for Vivendi to acquire Ubisoft at all, because being under their huge thumb will encourage them to take less risks and stifle innovation. And I honestly can't help but feel bad for C.A.G.E.D and his family. He and his family built this company from the ground up, and here it is about to be pulled out from underneath them. Say what you want about Ubisoft's practices, Yves was easily one of the best parts of the company. You get the sense that the guy genuinely cares about the games he's making. I mean, just look how excited he was at E3 when they announced their partnership with Nintendo. It's not all bad, there actually might be a light at the end of the tunnel. Industry analysts predict that Vivendi could potentially spend up to $6 billion trying to acquire Ubisoft. A Vivendi executive has stated that they might pull back their aggressive approach if they can't get an offer lower than $1 billion or less. So as long as the C.A.G.E.D family sticks to their guns and buys up as many stocks as they can within financial reason, then they might actually come out victorious on this. And honestly, I hope they do. Once again, I know Ubisoft isn't a shining example of innovation in the games industry, but Ubisoft is independent and I think their hearts are in the right place. Vivendi is so big that if they acquired Ubisoft, it would just make more red tape and make things more difficult for developers to actually innovate in their games. I completely sympathize with the C.A.G.E.D family and I hope they come out the other side of this on top. Speaking of aggressive tactics in gaming, Epic Games' Fortnite Battle Royale has officially gone free to play this week. This new mode launches 100 players into a giant map where they must loot, shoot, and survive until they're the last person standing. Winner, winner, chicken... yeah, they basically just copied PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and shoved it into their PvE game as a new PvP mode. PUBG developer Bluehole is pretty unhappy about this too. They've officially come out and stated that they're upset with Epic Games and that further action legal action may be required going further. Bluehole later came out and clarified that it isn't the fact that Epic made a similar mode that has them upset, but it's because Epic actually used PUBG in some of their promotional material to promote their own game. But I don't think that's really much of a legal ground to stand on. I think it more has to do with the fact that Epic and Bluehole are actually partners and they've been working together on PUBG for a very long time. One could argue that this is a huge conflict of interest for Epic and that they could have used technology or techniques that they learned from working with Bluehole in developing their own Battle Royale mode. This has a little bit more legal ground in my opinion, even though, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But it just sounds like something that they could actually argue in court. But then again, this whole argument's kind of shaky considering that there are so many Battle Royale games out there and they all pretty much just copy PUBG to a T. Honestly though, I've played both games and I think that they can coexist. PUBG is trying to be the gritty, realistic Battle Royale game, whereas Fortnite is trying to be the arcadey, kind of fantastical game. I've been playing Fortnite a lot the past couple of days because it's actually out on consoles, so I can play it with a controller, which I'm most comfortable with, so I kind of prefer it to PUBG. I mean, I have an absolute absolute blast while playing it. I know I'm in the minority here, and I know that I'm kind of alone when it comes to preferring this game over PUBG, but yeah, it just fits with me. I like the arcadey style of it. I think they are both really fun games that can coexist without issue because they have different feels overall. Sure, the overall premise is almost identical, but the actual gameplay itself is what matters, and the gameplay feels different. The differences in mechanics between Fortnite and PUBG are significant in my eyes, at least when you're actually playing the game, but that's just my 2 cents. Now this story is still developing, so I'll be sure to let you guys know whether or not Bluehole decides to go forward with this further action. So of course, just after we released last week's patch notes, an announcement came out that has Half-Life fans like myself finally having something to rejoice in and something to make us happy. The Half-Life 1 mod C.A.G.E.D was released on Steam this past Saturday after a 15+ year development under developer Cale George, who was actually a developer at Valve at one point in time. C.A.G.E.D allows players to put their own prison break into action. You must solve puzzles and blast through enemies to make it out alive. The mod even has an 80s action movie vibe to it, similar to Far Cry Blood Dragon that released a few years back. It has a great sense of humor and presents a good challenge, even if it is a bit short. I actually did a full playthrough of the mod, and you can find that link in the description below, but if you couldn't already tell, I had an absolute blast with the mod. I really can recommend this mod to everybody. I mean, it's basically free. All you have to do is own a copy of Half-Life 1, which, I mean, Valve hands out like candy, so if you don't have that already, I mean, how is that possible? There's another link in the description for the download page for the mod so you can experience it for yourselves. Speaking of Valve, this past week they removed 173 games from the Steam marketplace that could be described as shovelware. These games, all from the same developer, Silicon Echo Studios, were notorious for taking assets from Unity and Unreal engines and just flipping them onto the Steam marketplace for a quick profit. These games barely worked and primarily served as a vessel for the trading card system on Steam, so people could just buy all these games for super cheap and get a bunch of cards that they could sell for pennies, eventually making some sort of profit, I'm sure. Think of it like the bots in PUBG that kind of just sit around in the games until they get enough stuff to buy crates, and then they sell those crates for pennies on the Steam marketplace. It's the same kind of principle. Well, Valve has officially and finally laid down the ban hammer on this practice, and we hope to see other asset flippers get the same treatment soon. But Silicon Echo Studios have done other shady things to get the target of Valve as well, like selling their games under a completely different studio name to just confuse people, and putting multiple games bundled into a single application to appear on Steam. Other YouTubers like SIDALPHA and Jim Sterling have covered this topic at length, and so I've left links in the description for the relevant videos that you guys can watch from them. I suggest you check them out to learn how god-awful the underbelly of Steam has become. Alright, now it's time to update you guys on something that I covered in a previous episode. Remember the issue with the Fortnite orc-slayer DLC for Shadow of War where it wasn't exactly clear where the money was going and all the profits and stuff? Well, now Warner Brothers and Monolith have officially changed their plans for the DLC. It will now be free to everyone, with refunds going out to those who already purchased the DLC, and they will be making a large donation to the late developer's family in place of all that money that they lost. This was honestly the best way they could have handled this. Now everyone gets to experience this awesome tribute for free, and they even left a link in their announcement for a donation page that you can donate money directly to the developer's family, which is pretty cool. I've also left that link in the description below. I know this episode's like the link dump episode, sorry about that, but this one's actually worthwhile, so if you want to donate to this developer's family, I suggest you do it. Now, if Monolith could just address the rest of the problems with the DLC in the game and the random loot boxes and stuff, that'd be great. And in another update, Bethesda has announced their next big addition to Skyrim's Creation Club by adding a survival mode mod. If it seems a bit underwhelming, then you're not alone. I mean, this is basically the same thing that added to Fallout 4 after launch for free, but it has a couple other things tacked on like temperature and things like that. Now, I know technically for the first week this mod will be free to anybody who wants to download it, but after that window you will have to pay for it. I just think this is kind of a scummy thing to do. I mean, Bethesda really needed good PR right now, so I don't know why they didn't go out of their way to just make this mode free for everybody permanently instead of having some sort of window for it to kind of just say, hey look, sorry we're kind of messing things up right now. Here's a mode for free that we could have released on the Creation Club, but we decided not to be nice to you guys. But No, they just released it on the Creation Club to be jerks. I don't know. If you're like me, you're just gonna stay far away from this mod and anything else on the Creation Club for that matter, and you're just gonna keep voting with your wallet on this issue. And for our final story today, and one that I wanted to seriously talk to you guys about, is when ex-Digital Extremes developer Charles Randall went to Twitter to express distress over the gaming community at large. It essentially said that the reason developers are not candid with their fans online is because they're worried about backlash and harassment. He goes on to state that gamers don't really know what game development is like, and so when you complain about a feature missing or something missing from a tech demo or something like that, you don't really know what happened throughout the development of that game, so you can't really complain about it. I'm paraphrasing here, I'm sorry if I'm taking anything out of context, but he basically said that the toxicity in the gaming community is just getting too much for developers. This is ultimately leading to developers not being as honest as they could be and kind of shying away from talking to the gaming community at all. Now they still talk to each other. He said that there's not much competition between developers themselves. They still communicate with each other, but they just don't want to communicate with their fans because they're worried about them just not understanding and just having an immense amount of backlash. This is why I try so hard to not just view games from a fan's perspective, but from a developer's perspective as well. I actually reviewed one of Charles Randall's old games a while ago called Pariah, and while the game certainly had its issues, I tried to understand where the developers were coming from at that time, and it improved my impression of the game overall. As gamers, we have to realize that game developers aren't high and mighty gods that have ultimate control over their video games. They're programmers working with code on computers trying to get something that even slightly resembles the idea they originally had in their head. Sometimes it's close and sometimes it's not, but either way, hard work, most of the time, is put into every single second of the game. Some games deserve backlash, like Right to Hell Retribution or Aliens Colonial Marines. Those are legitimately bad games. But we need to realize that there is a fine line between criticism and blind hate. Like it or not, real people worked on these games and they gave up a lot to make sure they got released. The team behind Mass Effect Andromeda worked their asses off. I mean, it was their first AAA game only to have it completely blow up in their face. And have it swept under the rug of, lol, look at these terrible animations. If it seems like I care a little too much about this, it's because I'm an aspiring game developer myself, but the one thing holding me back, the one thing stopping me from trying and learning code and making my own games, is you guys. I'm terrified of you guys. Well, most of you anyway. It says a lot when you look intrinsically at a group that you align yourself with, gamers, and you find barely any rational discussion about anything. It's always, this game is absolute shit, or they're only trying to get money out of us, cash grab. And I know I'm guilty of this too. I called out Ghost Recon Wildlands for being a lazy mess of a game. The difference here is I didn't go to every single forum after that and contact the developers directly on Twitter to make fun of them, scold them, and talk about how shitty their game was. I guess what I'm trying to say is you have to take the good with the bad in video games. Continue to be a healthy skeptic. Criticize things you don't like, that's fine. But at least acknowledge that people worked on it. They worked hard on it. Grunt programmers who worked for very little pay, up to 80 hours a week, for something you didn't even enjoy, and they might not even enjoy themselves. A game isn't announced and then it comes out. That's not how things work. Development is a process, and it is a long process sometimes, and things can change. And once you get to a certain point, once the game's 75% done, you can't just go back and start over from scratch. Once something's set in stone, it's unfortunately set in stone. You don't hate a game, you just don't like it. And that's fine. Can't we just leave it at that instead of making it our life's goal to shit on a game whenever it comes up? That's the end of my rant, and if you were able to piece together any sort of point from all of that, then I applaud you. I just really want to get my thoughts out there for you guys. Whew, and that's it for this episode. That was a doozy, and I think it was actually our longest episode to date. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check the description for links to all the sources in this video, as well as a few extras. And be sure to stick around for the end card that's coming up in a few seconds to see what YouTube recommends for you next. Also, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to make sure that we can keep making weekly content like this. But that's it for me. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!